Hey, welcome everybody to We Heart SF. Thank you for getting here in the middle of summer and this beautiful day in the park. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. All right, so we're going to get started here. I'm going to want to welcome you to We Heart SF. Uh, the monthly version of the We Heart SF. Thank you for being here. We've got a great guest today. Wanted to kind of let you know. I know we got at least a couple of people here that are new today. So, um, We Heart SF is a gathering of some, individuals. Let's see if I'm going the right way. Um, Individuals that have had a big heart for over 2 years. We've been gathering here. It's been funded and supported by Geo, which is kind of a digital platform that for the Web3 for knowledge capture. It's been going through a lot of global exposure and development efforts. And it's been amazing to kind of a journey to kind of get us to where we are today. We have had over 100 meetings recorded on the session from We Heart SF. And if you want to check them out, we've got one underneath us, which is the We Heart SF community, and we've got one under Innovate. We have some announcements at the end of today that we want to walk through a little bit. But we do have a special guest today, right on time at 12:15 here. Our special guest today is Adrian. Adrian did speak before at an Innovate event. He's got an organization here in town that's doing some amazing work. Pretty incredible activities going on, and we wanted to kind of tell that story because it's a game-changing story for us. It's all about the structuring of data and how we're helping the community itself. So what we're doing here with We Heart SF is really building our network of relationships with other people here in the city and beyond. But we're also learning about organizations that are doing some amazing things. We want to tell those stories. We want to kind of support them. And we kind of want to go forward aware of what is the potential to do good in the community here. We're going to do a deep dive into that. Michelle and I are going to kind of lead a discussion at the very end. So please don't leave early. We want to make sure we have that conversation at the very end. But I would like to introduce you to Adrian. Adrian, come on up here. All right. I'm going to give you a microphone here. So Adrian, you've been here for how many years in the city since graduating from USF?
13.
Wow. And what I hear is the year after you graduated from USF, you got this started. Maybe didn't have this name, but this was kind of born out of your graduation years, right? So, so you kind of grew up here, cut your teeth, get your organization structured, and now you're kind of well on your way, right?
Well, I'm doing my best. That's what I'll say.
That's right. So recently you became kind of a central figure, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but Adrian has been kind of a celebrity of sorts.
It's news to me.
He was impacted by the announcements of budget adjustments here in the city, and he started a hunger strike over having his funding and support cut here in the cost. And suddenly we all remembered Adrian and we're like, dude, we need to tell the story because it ends in a hopeful space, and we're going to tell that whole story. But I want Adrian to kind of tell the story from early in his walk, kind of how he grew up, how he got here, and why he does what he does. But his legal services in the city of San Francisco are amazing. So Adrian, it is all yours.
Thank you. The org I founded and run, it's called Open Door Legal. And our mission, the whole reason I went to law school is to pioneer universal access to civil legal representation. So a little bit about me. Here's a picture with me and my dad. I was a very idiosyncratic kid because as soon as I read the encyclopedia, I became kind of obsessed with this question of why do we have so much poverty in America? And that kind of, my whole lifelong trajectory kind of followed from that question. And by the time I went to college, I kind of studied systemic poverty. And through this sort of meandering series of research and discussions and field work, I came to the conclusion that the major reason was because we don't have universal access to legal assistance in this country. So I said, if I could just do that, we could dramatically reduce poverty in San Francisco and across the country. And so I wrote a business plan, went to law school. Here's a picture of me and my wife when we drove across the Golden Gate Bridge to move to San Francisco. And 2 weeks after I got my license, I started Open Door Legal. We started with a budget of $35,000 in the back of a Salvation Army. And we put a sign on the street for anyone walking by. It says you can get legal help here. And with just that sign and almost no other outreach, we were pretty much overwhelmed with requests for help. Hundreds of people would come to us in the first year and typically would say something like, I've been to 5 or more places trying to get legal help. They've all turned me away. And, you know, this is my last chance. And it was extremely stressful. Um, it's one thing to kind of read about the overwhelming need for justice in this country, and it's another thing to experience it personally on the ground. I work, some little stories is at one point I worked so hard I ended up going to the emergency room, like lost my eyesight because I had such a headache. I didn't sleep for like 2 years straight through the night. Um, constantly worrying about funding, all the hundreds of people coming to us, had to learn like 35 areas of law on my own. Um, so it was really tough. Um, but I wanted to take a step back a little bit and share a little bit more about the need for legal help because not everyone sort of understands. You might have heard that you have a constitutional right to an attorney, but that's only in criminal matters, and the vast majority of legal issues that people would experience are civil issues. Um, so, as an example, one of our early clients was named Claudia, and she sort of grew up in San Francisco, went to high school in San Francisco, married her high school sweetheart, and unfortunately, their relationship turned very abusive. He would assault her about twice a week for 8 years. The police were called at one point, but they never did anything. She was even hospitalized because of the abuse, but that didn't end it. And one day, her husband calls the cops and says, "Oh, my wife has hit me," which was not true, but they come, they arrest her. She spends a few nights in jail. She's released, but and not criminally charged because there was no evidence. But she was given a civil restraining order that prevented her from going home. So she couldn't go home. She couldn't see her children. She couldn't get a change of clothes. He also took all the money out of the joint checking account, so she couldn't get any money. And she ended up homeless in San Francisco. And she went to about 10 different agencies looking for legal help. She had a trial coming up on whether or not she would be allowed back in her home. And they all turned her away because they said, we don't have capacity, we don't have time, this isn't the kind of issue we handle. And that's when she saw the street sign, walked in um, about a week before her first hearing. We were able to do a 3-day trial on her behalf. We got her back in the home. We got her husband out of the home. We got her sole custody of the children. We got her child support and a divorce, even though he tried to hide all the community assets. This was all done for a tiny fraction of what homeless services cost. Um, and she was able to re-enter the workforce. She bought a home in the Central Valley 2 years ago, and she has not been hit again. So why was it so hard to get help? Well, in California, we only have about 0.79 attorneys funded to help low-income people in civil matters for every 10,000 eligible people. So that's less than 800 attorneys in the entire state of 40 million people. This is so bad that every state listed here has a sort of better ratio of legal aid attorneys than California. So I've highlighted the quote red states so you can see states like Florida and Kansas and Wyoming have better funding for legal aid than California. And according to the state bar, roughly 2/3 of people who try to get legal help will be turned away and will be unable to get help anywhere. Um, and if California is bad compared to other states, the US is a true outlier in the world. We're the only developed country that doesn't guarantee legal representation in civil matters. Um, we're almost the only one that makes this distinction actually between criminal and civil matters. And every blue colored country on this map is rated as having a more accessible civil justice system than the US. So that means in these countries, if you are poor, it is easier to access the courts and enforce your civil rights than in the US. The red countries are rated as worse. So at Open Door Legal, to tackle this problem, we tried to kind of create sort of like a general hospital for legal issues. The way current legal aid functions is kind of in the face of this overwhelming need to be very, very specific about who they help and the kind of issues they work with. But that doesn't really scale well because it creates a very fragmented system. So we said, well, rather than doing that, why don't we kind of operate like a place-based general practice, like a general hospital that will sort of be a provider of last resort to guarantee legal help to people that can't afford it. And as a result, we do over 35 areas of law, everything from domestic violence to evictions to asylum petitions, bankruptcy, estate planning, elder abuse. And after about 10 years of work in Bayview, about 20% of the entire population of the neighborhood had come to us for legal help. Every dot on this map is a family that we've represented. And our office, first office was. So that is just an example of the scale of the need. Yeah, Ted? Yeah, so they have to be income qualified. They have to be in our service area, and they have to have like a legal problem that can be addressed. Yeah.
How did the U.S. get so bad with civil representation? And why are we unique in this?
Well, I guess there's two kind of reasons. So the divergence basically started happening in the 70s. The Supreme Court came out with a constitutional right to legal representation in criminal matters in the 60s. And I think because of that, progressives stopped pushing to expand access to justice in the civil realm. And then conservatives started pushing back and defunding legal aid. And that really started with Reagan. And so we kept basically getting worse over time as other countries kept getting better, right? So like, Brazil in 1989 passed a constitutional amendment to create a right to counsel in all civil matters, but we actually became less accessible over the 90s, so that's an example. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you charge people anything? And do any of the cases, if not, are any of the cases generating income for you all down the line?
The cases don't generate income. We don't charge clients. To qualify for services, clients have to be less than 50% AMI. But our client base is skewed to very poor. So it's like over 70% earn less than 30K a year and live in San Francisco. Another example was our client, Ms. Pobre, bought her home in Bayview in the 90s with her husband, who unexpectedly passed about 6 months later. So for 25 years, she spends over 60% of her income on the principal and mortgage of this home. She accrues over $800,000 in equity. And as she nears old age, it becomes harder to make her payments. But she thought it would be okay because of all of her equity. Unfortunately, the bank decided to immediately foreclose on the property, didn't notify her of the foreclosure, and then sold it to a property investment group for $50,000 and 1 penny, which represented 1 penny more than her outstanding principal. Then they sent her a check in the mail for literally 1 penny to represent her 25 years of investment in this property. Then the investment group moved to evict her from the premises. And this is very common. One study by the assessor recorder found that 84% of foreclosures in San Francisco are done illegally. But again, if you're in foreclosure proceedings, you're not going to have the money to pay for an attorney, and the state doesn't provide one. So we were able to file a wrongful foreclosure action, get all of her equity returned, get the title returned, and get damages to pay off the principal and all of her remaining credit card debt. And we wrote a trust so she could pass down this now $1 million asset to her daughter who's disabled. And this is, again, a lot cheaper than homeless services. So as our funding has grown, we've expanded the number of neighborhoods that we've covered. We cover all the neighborhoods on the left, and we don't have the funding yet to cover the neighborhoods on the right. And that principally is Tenderloin, Mission, Chinatown, North Beach, and the Castro. So with that context, let me talk a little bit about homelessness. The most important thing to know about homelessness is for every one person the city helps exit homelessness, based off the city's own data, 3 to 4 people enter it. And that means it is not possible to solve the problem without prevention. But prevention gets a tiny fraction of the dollars and attention that from the city and from the citizenry. And this, more than anything else, is why we never seem to be making progress on homelessness. So what causes homelessness? Well, according to the point-in-time count survey, it's only like 25% drug, alcohol, and mental health issues. These issues are not really the causes of homelessness. They're more like the symptom of homelessness. People become more likely to use drugs, more likely to have mental health issues after they become homeless. It's also not evictions. That's only about 14%, and that includes both formal and informal evictions. So if you hear the rhetoric, it's all about, housing costs and mental health, and drug issues, and that is about 1/3 of the causes of homelessness in San Francisco. And this data has been pretty stable over the last 20 years. So family issues actually cause more homelessness than evictions. And then there's a lot that are caused by lost income and lost assets and domestic violence. But it's even that is a bit of an abstraction. So what happens is there are surveys of homeless people to understand why they became homeless, and you get these qualitative responses like this, and then this get coded by researchers to come up with a chart like you saw. And the problem with the coding is how the answers are coded depends on the professional training of who's doing the surveys. So, we have examples like this, was injured at work, but ineligible for workers' comp, or lost job due to pregnancy discrimination, or was told to get out and had their unit locked. And what all of these examples have in common is these are all solvable legal problems, right? But the surveys don't code them as legal issues or access to justice issues. They will code them as social conditions, economic conditions, or something like that. And that's why nobody understands that sort of access to justice and legal issues is a huge driver of homelessness. But if we kind of look at the UCSF statewide survey and we look at the point-in-time count data sets, we can say maybe about half of everyone is becoming homeless because of an unaddressed legal issue. So to test the effect Open Door Legal was having, especially in Bayview, we ran the first experimental study on homelessness ever done in San Francisco. And we kind of brought in 2 PhD economists to design it and help run it. And what we found is the kind of legal issues that cause homelessness is very broad. It includes eviction defense, but it also includes employment law, consumer and public benefits, and family law. And you can look at this sort of by mechanism, right? So about half the issues were kind of housing being illegally taken away. A third of the issues was about income or assets being illegally taken away, and about 15% was the physical security being taken away. And that would then trigger them to become homeless.
What if you go back to that slide, what is TRC?
Oh, so the TRC program is the Tenant Right to Counsel program that the city funds to provide eviction defense. So that funding only covers about 1/4 of the legal issues that cause homelessness. So basically what we saw is from the study is that the treatment group was much, I think actually these should be switched. The control group should be on the top. Oh no, the treatment group, sorry. Um, um, so we divided kind of incoming service requests into a control and a treatment group, and sort of made them statistically identical. And the treatment group got access to our services, and the control group was sort of just given referrals. And what happened was the treatment, and then we basically matched that data to HSH's homeless information management system to see who became homeless subsequent to requesting help at Open Door Legal. And based off that, we were able to determine that like there was a huge difference between the control and treatment group. So the treatment group was about 13% less likely to become homeless, and the control group was about 33% more likely to become homeless, just by whether or not they could access our services. And so this is segmented for people who had a legal issue that was addressable and who were at risk of homelessness. That means sort of that ODL prevented about one person from becoming homeless every 2.4 days in the study period. And we did it for a fraction of the cost of alternatives. So based off the cost of services times the targeting coefficient, we spent about $7,350 to prevent one household from becoming homeless, which typically include multiple people. And if you compare that to 2 RCTs done on financial assistance, in those 2 studies, you needed to spend about $50,000 to prevent one household from becoming homeless. So it's about 6 times more cost efficient than financial assistance. And financial assistance itself is several times more cost efficient than the kind of shelter and permanent supportive housing approach that the city is taking. Yeah.
Just a clarifying question, the financial assistance is actual money that these cities or counties would provide directly to the client?
Yeah, so financial assistance, that's the main prevention strategy, like program. So people who are at risk will come to like an agency and says, I need $2,000, $10,000, whatever, to prevent myself from becoming homeless. And it's typically used for back rent, or it could be used for sort of maybe a security deposit or furniture or moving costs or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
So this makes sense because, in addition to preventing homelessness, the average person in the survey, the average client in the survey got a cash benefit of about $28,000. So if you just gave people at risk of homelessness $30,000, you would kind of see a similar effect size as what we did. But this $28,000, it's not coming from the city, it's coming from, the employer who refused to pay wages, or the bank who stole their home, or, kind of et cetera. I'll skip this story, but here's what another client said. And they had been sort of victims of probate fraud by their aunt, and said, my aunt was calling us squatters, acting like we've been vagabonds. There's no question we've been on the streets without open door legal. Okay, so about the city's budget. Well, the city kind of funds legal services in a couple main grant categories. So if you remember the chart around the kind of legal issues that cause homelessness, about 20%, 26% of legal issues are funded by what's called the Tenant Right to Counsel program. 60% are funded through the General Civil Legal Services program, and 14% are funded through the Gender-Based Violence program. And last fiscal year, the city allocated $17.7 million to the Tenant Right to Counsel program, $4.2 million to the General Civil program, which handles like 60% of the issues that cause homelessness, and only $1 million to the Gender-Based Violence program. And most of this 4.2 million in General Civil was directly because of Open Door Legal's advocacy to kind of build that bucket up. And if we look at kind of the homeless count over the last, or since 2013, just that the number of people who became homeless because, and were living in San Francisco before they became homeless, so kind of excluding people who moved to SF, we see that it was increasing from 2013 to 2019, and then it began decreasing. And this kind of maps on to basically the budget growth of ODL over time, and this kind of fits the data from the experimental study. Yeah.
At the pie chart one, you're saying that that $4 million was actually an increase to what they had been previously budgeting to that whole.
Yeah, so if
Two-thirds
you go
black
back to like
section.
2015,
Mhm.
it was probably like $500,000 in that 4.2 bucket.
Interesting to
Yeah.
see that. Okay.
So
thank you.
so basically over 2019, 2017, 2019, 2022, we did a lot of advocacy to increase that line item, and it started to cut homelessness. And we basically believe that, based off the study, that if we could increase our funding by another $4 million per year and serve those remaining neighborhoods, we could cut homelessness by 40% from the current baseline in about 4 years. So that's what we predict, all other variables remaining constant. Unfortunately, the mayor, rather than do that, decided to kind of go in the opposite direction and proposed to eliminate all funding for general civil legal services. So for 60% of the issues that cause homelessness, the mayor said we don't want to fund any of it. And we were able to estimate, thanks to the study, that this would cause about 320 people to be forced onto the street every year, compounding every year, simply because they would no longer be able to get to legal help. It would impoverish thousands more. So as Paul mentioned, I went on a hunger strike to protest this. I thought it was bad policy, immoral, and ignored all of the data. And was able to get about 70% of it restored. Thank you. I was on a hunger strike for 15 days, and I lost 17 pounds in that time. So, yeah.
Dumb question, but what was your first full meal after the hunger strike?
Well, actually, that's the most dangerous time, is when you start eating again, because I think I had a steak dinner. Okay, so in summary, most people who need legal help cannot obtain it. San Francisco, as far as I can tell, spends more than the median on every single possible public service except for legal assistance, right? To address homelessness, we have to focus on prevention. I'm not against shelter. I'm not against permanent supportive housing. We need it. But why would you allow people to become homeless when you can prevent it. It's cheaper, it causes less trauma, it seems smart. Legal services is the key to preventing homelessness. Not everyone who becomes homeless is because of an unjust legal issue, and other forms of prevention are necessary, like financial assistance. But if someone has a legal issue, that should be the first line of defense, is helping them with that, right? Rather than thinking of it as an afterthought. And we have to convince the mayor to make the right investments. We do get a lot of philanthropy, but philanthropy alone cannot scale up the solutions. The city is the only one with the capital to do it. And so far, the mayor has not shown interest in prevention and has actually wanted to cut the only program with experimental data backing it. So, so that's my little presentation.
So we do have a Q&A here. So I think there's 3 mics that are available. We want to start here and over here. We got this row. So you had one slide in there that showed just the impact you're having in the Bayview, which is interesting. My question is, do you have like a concierge, or how do people become aware of Open Door? Is it just signs? Do you have places where people can meet with you, or they can walk in and talk, or do you have to call and make an appointment?
So yeah, I mean, people find out about us either referrals from community members or from other CBOs. We don't do that much outreach because the truth is we can't even keep up with the number of people who are actively trying to get help. You know, I mean, that's the thing about legal services. In most kind of human services like workforce development, you have to spend a lot of money and time on outreach to get people to, you know, kind of opt into the help. In legal services, there is not enough funding to help anywhere near enough the number of people who are actively trying to get the help.
And do you have like volunteers and paralegal folks that you're always training? Are they coming in to help you or extend your reach or extend your capacity?
Yeah, we have about a staff of 50 full-time. And then on top of that, like this summer, we had about 30 interns and volunteers working with us to extend our capacity.
Other questions? Here we go.
Hello. Very impressive presentation. I would imagine that you probably approached Mayor Laurie with the study that you've done. And I'm wondering what sort of comments you got back from him or his associates.
Well, you know, it's a good example of bureaucratic dysfunction. So the mayor was impressed. I gave this presentation to the chief of homelessness and support and family services. He was very impressed. The department that manages homelessness, HSH, is impressed and is on our side. But the legal services portfolio is actually managed by a different department called the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. And their policy chief doesn't know it at all about legal services or prevention, but they were the ones who got to make the decisions about what they were going to cut in their budget. So that's how it got cut.
Have you, I'm sure you've considered, but presenting a proposition at the city level? And what's involved with that, or why haven't you taken that route?
Well, I mean, we may have to do proposition. I'm hoping not to. It's a lot. I mean, that would basically be my full-time job for like 6 months, to collect the signatures and do the work to get a yes vote. Yeah. And I'm not even sure it would pass.
Yeah, one of the things, when we were having this conversation, Adrian, around your hunger strike, was that maybe one of the district supervisors who runs the budget committee wasn't very keen on what you were doing. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that and how and is there anything we can do to like put pressure on that budget committee, like just as public advocacy?
Well, I mean, in addition to the hunger strike, we had hundreds of people send in letters. We had over 20 news articles that were published. and we had a protest vigil with local churches. We had a rally. I mean, so it was a lot of tactics. I mean, the hunger strike is basically a direct action tactic, and makes elected officials feel pressured, and they don't like it. But that's also kind of the point, And only did it because all of the data, research, conversations went nowhere. Like if they had just listened at the beginning, it wouldn't have been necessary. But I mean, I can see their point of view, but actually, if they were feeling pressured, that was kind of the whole point,
But I mean, even before that hunger strike happened, my understanding is that the budget committee had its own agenda. I mean, were you aware of that, or any insights into
Yeah, I
that?
mean, the mayor has an agenda, the budget committee has an agenda. I mean, the hunger strike, it's not just for them. It was a tactic to get media attention
Yeah.
and a tactic to build public awareness of the issue, and also to convince the mayor not to do it again in the next budget cycle, right? So there's kind of I don't know. I mean, we could have done something else. Like we could have done a sit-in, or we could have,
Yeah.
what some of the unions did, which was disrupt the legislative chamber.
No, that was all phenomenal, and
Yeah.
I'm so happy you were able to get 70% back. I'm just trying to think on an ongoing, moving forward basis. So it's not just a crisis event or a crisis moment, but how do we help spread the word about what you're doing, and make ongoing pressure on all of our representatives in the board of supervisors here. It feels like that's what's needed. I mean,
Yeah,
Lori
definitely.
really liked what you were doing, but there was, this insider political pressure
Yeah.
that wouldn't let him really fight for your approach. And it's just, I know a lot of this is internal city politics, but why is that allowing data-driven decisions to not happen?
I mean, it sounds kind of rhetorical. So I agree with you. I mean, you would hope you could just go to the elected officials, give them sound data,
Yeah.
and they would make a smart decision. Sometimes it works. Sometimes they only make a decision because they have enough basically constituent pressure,
Yeah.
And so we kind of have to do both.
Yeah, so if there was a letter writing campaign or something, just to get everyone in this room, hey, do one thing when you go home today, write an email to your, your city council member to advocate for what Adrian's doing, stuff like that. And if we could just make that perpetual, it would just be amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
The perpetual letter writing campaign.
Yeah.
Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. I have kind of a two-part question.
Okay.
One is, you got some cool media attention. You probably didn't get all the media attention you wanted. You certainly didn't get all the media attention I want, Is there any residual? Are they continuing to follow you? Is they're interested in further? Do you have an open door? They're like, man, keep us updated, or was it?
So I am, well, no, but I am continuing to pitch stories, and actually, I think the Standard is going to do a series of articles on access to justice issues in San Francisco, starting on August 19th, with a series of stories on domestic violence and how hard it is for survivors to get legal help in the city.
Okay. My other question is, we've had Together SF present here multiple times, I believe. They're good friends. So this question is to Paul and Michelle and Eric as much as to you. They're really good at getting props passed, right? They're into community activism. This should be in their sweet spot. They're into data-driven decisions that make the city better. Do you know Together SF at all? Do you have a relationship with them? Have you talked to them to get them behind this issue?
I actually did reach out to Together SF. I had a very weird call, and then they were like, no, we're not going to do any budget advocacy. So
this was how recent?
I want to say a year and a half ago, maybe. But that's okay, you know. Like one reason why it's so effective is because there's very low diminishing returns because nobody's funding it, nobody's even heard about it, right? But that also cuts the other way. Then it's really hard to get awareness about the issue, and it's hard to get people to talk about it because it's not something that they have been advocating for or researching over the last 20 years, you know? So, so anyways, so that's kind of why nobody's heard about it.
I may have missed this, but how many cases did you support like last year? And do you have a breakdown of how many that's translated into saving people's homes?
Well, we did about 1,300 active cases, full scope cases last year, and probably if I did some rough math, probably prevented, I want to say 200 to 300 people from becoming homeless who otherwise would have been. Not all of the cases we do prevent are kind of in the homelessness prevention bucket, I should say. You know, there's other kinds of work we do too.
Yep. Who's got the mic? Here, Janet.
So 200-300 cases that you guys have resolved positively?
No. We've resolved the vast majority of cases positively.
Mhm.
Not every case is about homelessness prevention. And then some of the positive cases for people at risk, the research shows they wouldn't have become homeless even if they had lost the case, right?
Oh, okay.
So if you just kind of drill it down, but that is actually a very high rate compared to the funding and kind of alternative methods.
Okay, there was a slide that you had shown. It was a figure for each case that cost about $7,000, a little more than $7,000.
So
per
actually,
case?
the cases are about half that. But what this slide was actually the cost of the service times the targeting coefficient, right? So you know, if basically what the study said is every other person at risk with a legal issue, we prevented from becoming homeless. And when you compare that to, let's say, financial assistance, the best targeting methods require you to serve about 20 households before you prevent one from becoming homeless. Because it's very hard to know on the front end for people who are at risk whether the service you provide is going to be the but-for cause of preventing them from becoming homeless, right? So that's why financial assistance is expensive. You know, like most programs, you're providing about $1,000 of help to a household. So per household, it's cheap, but most of the time you're not preventing homelessness, right? It's only preventing like 1 in every 20 cases. So anyway, so that's why overall it's expensive.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. This is a new area that I hadn't thought about, and so I really appreciate you sharing this with us. But there were some details that just because I don't know how things are on the back end. For instance, in Medicare, when a doctor is treating someone and the government is paying for it, there are billable hours or there are costs that you can find a code, and those are coded to be able to get reimbursement, right?
Right.
But the chart that you showed, there were roughly about $20 million budgeted for this in the different 3 sectors that you had shown. So about $20 million. And if you're one of the few, if not probably the only organization dealing with this with staff of 50, I'm wondering, so the $20 million, how do you get reimbursement? Is it hourly, or how do you, is there a code, or?
So we're not the only org. There's several orgs. The grants from the city are reimbursement based, but the difference between like Medicaid or Medicare and legal services is in Medicare, as long as you do qualifying work, you know you'll get reimbursed. But the way these grants work, you get reimbursed up to your grant cap, which is always going to be lower than the total demand, right? So so you know, if they wanted to do universal program, they could do a reimbursement program where as long as you do qualifying work, you will get the funding, right? But instead, they kind of grant out these flat amounts and then say, you can get reimbursed up to this amount. And that's why, the total money allocated is grossly insufficient. So that's why most people can't get help.
So, Adrian, I was wondering that what I noticed is that there's a lot of your message that it's around uh, thinking through or noodling through this idea of raising awareness.
Uh-huh.
So, where I come in is where I'm a representative of the faith-based community,
Mhm.
and I'm working with pastors, churches, and the softer skills, which are like counseling and communications and stuff like that. But what I want to know is what off the top of your head is a possible good way to take that skill and then make and build awareness amongst the community members that I run with.
Well, I mean, the most direct way is I do sermons at churches. I've done 4 on this topic. So, and I've also presented at the Interfaith Council, the same presentation. Um, um, and yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, the faith community is the only one that really has been pushing for access to legal services for the poor. I would love this to be on the agenda of the Faith in Action kind of group. It's something they're advocating for as well. So,
we'll have to get the Faith in Action group involved in this thing.
Mhm.
So just on my own, I did, along with our team, we went through almost 1,000 organizations that the city gives money to.
hmm
About 60% of them don't publish the obligatory annual report. Like, what do you do? You provide data on everything you do, which was amazing. We just objectively looked over your website. We looked over your report. It was clear that the money you got, the city has measurable value.
Mhm.
And the real challenge that I found was there is no expectation to deliver against a city's goal. The nonprofits in San Francisco can ask for money. They can promise to be really busy. They can have big buildings, and they can touch a lot of people, but there's no expectation that they actually have to do anything good for the city.
Well, but the reverse is also true. If you do publish data, you do have good metrics, you do even experimental studies on your work, the city doesn't increase your funding, like they don't even track the service unit costs of the services the providers do. It's not even like a component of the RFP process.
Right.
It's
It's like a perfect storm. That's kind of why we drew this up here. So Mayor Lurie got elected based on these items up here. This was his campaign to get elected, become mayor. And in that, he has one bullet point that says, I want to connect people to shelter, treatment, and support service. But it's the 4th one down on the top piece, which falls underneath cleaning up the streets, right? And then down below, he says he wants to be more responsible with city finances. And then we find out that there's a deficit of 800 million, and he's looking for buckets he can cut. You happen to be a small bucket, so he can cut it, and he doesn't have to look at the services, right? He's not looking at the data. He's just looking at, he's got a big number to cut out there. But at the same time, what he's looking at is he wants to reward innovation. And my comment, coming from a different industry, innovation is like a bug. It's like a flaw in a factory. If a factory is running really well and something different happens, it's disruptive. Innovation is a different kind of thing. And so when you do something different, there's a lot of people in the machine that don't like you and your innovation, right? But the baseline is you have to know how much it's costing for old legacy funding to go out and what they're producing. And if you're not measuring that, when you find an innovator, you can't really figure out how valuable they are. They're shortcutting the process. They're bringing incredible value in new ways to the organization. And nobody wants to change because everybody's benefiting from the old way that's very expensive. And there's legacy organizations that have been promised money for doing what they do. And they don't want to see any of that money going to someone who might be doing it better.
Yeah. So I agree with all of that. And I'll just briefly say not everyone is very happy with our approach or our data or our messaging. But basically, as far as I can, the city, for a nonprofit, I think the two most important data points are the service unit costs for the kind of end service you provide and the benchmark qualitative feedback of your beneficiaries. How do they perceive the service? And the city doesn't collect that information or ask you to even provide it when you request a grant. So so the whole quote competitive bidding process they use doesn't incorporate those two data points. And so I don't know how it can, so if you do if you are able to provide a better quality service for less money, the city wouldn't even know, right? And it wouldn't even be factored into how it makes awards. And as far as I can tell, if this is what he said he was going to do, this is not actually how the budget process worked out. Like the legacy orgs overwhelmingly kept their funding, and sort of new approaches, that's what was cut. Because he, it was really, he kind of delegated the decision down to the departments. And when you have legal services, the city has cared so little about legal services that it's actually managed as a side project of the housing agency, right? So none of them are lawyers. None of them have worked in legal services. They don't know anything about it. They don't go to conferences. They never read any of the literature. So that's obviously what they're going to cut,
Right. And I think the difficult thing, what we were learning about the 1,000 organizations, is there's no standardized data. There's no storytelling for the city's benefit about what every nonprofit is doing to help the city, because many of the nonprofits are telling the people that gave them the money that they're busy and they're doing good work. But is it good work for the city? Is it really helping to solve the city's problem, or is it just they're fiscally responsible with all the people and their staff? They do some really good things. Until the city sets goals, outcome goals, there's no way that nonprofits can align or even start to work together or be measured. So if you share a goal and then you standardize, like what you said, the services, if services become a measurable item, and you can look at the efficiency of how they're being delivered, you can then start to improve the city itself. And you also can create gaps where there's no way the city could do everything. So where can the community step in and fill those gaps? We can't even figure out how to fill the gaps because we don't know where those gaps are.
Mhm.
Because every nonprofit says they do everything for everybody all the time, right? And it's like, well, if everybody's doing such a great job, how come we have such a highly visible symptom of broken things in our city sitting on our sidewalks?
Yeah.
We had Mayor Laurie here before the election. We, as a community, this room was packed. We got behind him. A lot of us kind of were excited about him. He sold us a certain thing. He's delivering the opposite of what he committed to us, and this isn't the only example. Can we invite him back under false pretenses and then grill him over it? And get all of your media friends here,
Ted, so I think that
I just put that on the record. So
right.
No, that was a joke. We want you back under the,
Right. No, I wanted to point out the fact that he's got a huge financial deficit, and he promised us that the way we fix the city is we get more money. Trying to do better with the city that's declining in resources because it's in decline is impossible. But if he had the money, these were the things he was going to work on. First, he's got to get the budget to a level set where he can take care of things. And he needs to understand what is the high value services that have that return, so he can do both of these. And this is a big impossible task. So I'm not saying that he's trying to hurt the city or pick on
I
Adrian.
agree with you that he's
Yeah.
not trying to hurt the city, and it's a big bureaucratic, you captured it great. It's a perfect example of a bureaucratic mess up. But this can help him. This is, it's what makes it hard, makes it compelling. Adrian isn't just showing how you can end homelessness. He's showing how you can liberate hundreds of millions of dollars out of the city's budget in 4 years with beginning right. You'll start seeing returns within months, as less people are on the streets. So my question is, what, other than all of us are super fired up, I want to go storm City Hall. What can we actually do, to get people's attention?
We have a question over there.
No, this is all really good. I think this is the point of why we do We Heart SF, is just to surface these conversations. And we want to spend a few minutes at the end of the session kind of talking about what we do with this community moving forward. So I think we've got 2 questions back there.
Great. We've heard a lot of, it sounds like traditional legal formats to deal with these problems. Coming to your office, going to court, doing some other sort of civil action. Technology is changing really quickly. Is there any self-help elements to what you're offering, Adrian, that could actually help some of your client base solve these problems on their own? In theory, the courts allow for self-representation and going to court. In practice, that's proven impossible in the past, but technology is changing really quickly. Maybe that's something that could work. And I know you're so focused on what you're doing. I'm not sure if you're thinking about how AI is changing this, but there's a lot of techies in here and they are thinking about that. And I'm wondering if you've got any tools that we might be able to supercharge to help people solve their own problems.
Well, I would say, just like you can't really address a serious medical issue without a doctor, you can't really address a serious legal issue without an attorney. There are certain low-lying issues that if people are competent, they could address on their own, let's say like security deposits. But even then, like, it's really hard to get an adverse party to listen to you even when you have the law on your side, if you don't have like a credible threat of litigation. Now, with that said, AI can be very helpful. We are actually in the process with the support of Salesforce of building out an AI intake agent and connecting it to our case management system. And this will be done by the end of the year. And this will really reduce the staff time required to collect documents and prepare guests for intakes. That is a kind of one way we're using AI. We've also working with another startup on AI to do kind of discovery and document automation. We're working with a third one around using AI to do kind of document or evidence management and research. So there's a lot of actually great use cases for AI that can help expand the number of people each attorney can serve, is what I would say.
Translate that. So what you're saying is AI could help identify the people that are coming to you that are appropriately needing representation, and the ones that aren't, you can help direct them to other places. So you saving on the intake side, you're able to filter them and redirect them if it's something you can help with, if it's something that they can get help at other places.
So the first use case for our AI intake agent, it's not really filtering them. It's helping them submit all the required data. So when someone requests help, they have to provide like income verification. They have to provide demographic information. We also need them, based off the claim, to submit evidence. Like, if you have an landlord-tenant dispute, we need them to submit a lease. And right now, for the average intakes, this takes about 2 hours of staff time to track down all of these documents and get them submitted, so we can, basically be compliant with all of our city grants, and then have enough evidence to do a good intake. So we can just eliminate that. That's kind of step one. Then the version 2 of the agent is going to basically help process referrals. So we'll use the agent to, identify collateral issues they need help with, let's say housing counseling, and then refer them to orgs and then follow up to make sure they got services at that org. So that's going to be kind of like version 2.
That's very cool. I know there was a question in the back.
Yes. Adrian, thank you for introducing us to some of your success cases. And it really kind of highlighted what the needs are out there. I just was wondering, how would you respond to someone who might say, this just feels like it's, again, pitting landlords and tenants. How would you, so I'm just kind of bringing someone else's voice into this. And if they might be asking, it's such a complex issue when we're dealing with these cases because it doesn't seem like the landlord, especially during COVID, where we see a lot of people having to forego rental payments, they're having expenses and maintenance still that they have to take care of. And we're living in a very pro-tenant city, very pro-tenant state. And over COVID, we've seen a lot of these landlords having to sell out, and we realize that a lot of these landlords are just mom and pop holding on to some real estate, and they're just scrimping and saving to get by. But then when we go into the legal issue of trying to keep people in those places without paying rent, it becomes harder for other people to even hold on to that property, and they end up selling out to someone like, I just heard that Harvard at one point owned so many different properties because these people were selling out in the city, didn't want to bother with tenants anymore. Their company called Veritas was holding on to all these properties because people sold out. So it doesn't seem like while there's relief for the tenants, there's no relief for the landlords. And it looks like a very complex issue. So how would you respond to someone who is saying the mood has kind of shifted and people are thinking, wow, landlords are hurting too. And I don't feel like we give enough support for landlords.
Well, I want to say I'm not anti-landlord and I'm not pro-tenant. I am pro access to justice, and I believe low-income landlords should also be able to get legal help. It is true in San Francisco, like many other cities. When you decide to rent out your property, even if you're like it's like entering into a highly regulated business, right? And there are a lot of regulations. And I am neutral about what those regulations should be. What I do know is that I have seen, just like there are bad tenants, I have seen so many bad landlords, and you would expect not 100% of people are going to operate their business in good faith, right? I have seen landlords intentionally and illegally lock people out of their homes, and not just like for-profit. I've seen nonprofit landlords do this, steal all of their property, assault them in their homes, or intentionally steal their security deposits, allow horrendous habitability issues without consequence. And, people should be able to get legal help when these like obvious legal violations occur. And like, as a society, not everyone who seeks out legal help is going to need it, right? But you want it to be available for the people that do need it. It's kind of what I would say. And we don't need to demonize any group. I'm not anti-banks, but sometimes banks mess up. I'm not anti-employer, but sometimes employers steal wages,
Yeah. I want to say the state has programs where they can reimburse homeowners. Many of the homeowners were unaware of that fund that was there. So it's a lack of information in terms of whoever's suffering the most, how they get the best help. So there are resources that are out there.
Just maybe just to kind of wrap up, if there aren't any other questions. I mean, this is really more forward thinking and what's next for Open Door Legal. What is your vision for what the future holds for the organization? Do you plan to scale to other cities?
Well, I mean, I feel like if we can't get the funding to make this work in San Francisco, where we have the money, it's very unlikely we'll be able to make this work in, let's say, Oakland, right? Even though there is huge need there. So yeah, our near-term goal is to finish scaling across SF, serve all of SF, and use technology to connect just not ourselves, but all the providers together into one network to ensure universal access to legal services for the people of the city, and to decrease homelessness by 40%, which, if we could achieve that, would be the largest decrease in homelessness in any city in California ever. So the idea is, if that can be achieved through this method, that will then create the interest in other jurisdictions to replicate it. And then, yeah, hopefully we could replicate the model across the state, across the country, and eventually, maybe be like our peer orgs, which is to guarantee legal help for everyone who needs it.
You
Our peer countries, yeah.
you mentioned a couple times other organizations that are also doing the same model that you're collaborating with. Are there? I assume they're in San Francisco, and they're doing it. Can you talk? Are they doing it as amazing as you guys are? Can you talk more about that and your plans of coordinating the services together? That you just mentioned?
Well, there are other legal aid groups, as I've mentioned, and they do fantastic work. Our model is a little different because we have like this intentional universal sort of program. But they will do like, let's say they'll say, oh, we have enough funding to do 500 asylum cases per year, or, to do, 300 restraining orders, or, 50 child custody cases. And so what'll happen is you could go to these agencies, but if you don't know exactly what kind of claim you need help with, they could turn you away. Or if they're already past their cap of how many cases they're going to get reimbursed for, they'll turn you away. So the actual experience for your guests trying to get help can be very frustrating. And that's why you get turned away at so many places. You don't really understand why. So that's why we're trying to create a kind of more system approach, right? To create sort of, universal access, as I've mentioned.
So you mentioned that, like the hospital being a generalist and having when we went through all the legal services, we found that there were people that provided certain line of sight or line of service functionality that also extended that and some legal services for that particular need. So we kind of niche legal services. You were the only organization we could find that was out there covering a wide breadth of civil services. You bring your complex issues to us and we address them all systematically. We're not going to send you to 2 or 3 other. We're not going to limit the number of people we take care of.
Yeah.
You guys have very good at kind of addressing the wider, specific, broad spectrum of needs that are out there. But Adrian, I know we're running out of time, but thank you so much for kind of taking the time. You guys, let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
And
I'll stick around too.
Yes. And want to be able to ask more questions, how we can get involved, how we can help. So I like the perpetual letter writing idea. As long as you don't get writer's cramp, that's awesome. So we have, We Heart SF has been for almost 2 years been gathering. We started off with a group of 6 or 7 people in a small little circle. We got bigger. We went to the classroom style setup here. It's been amazing. We've had as many as 170 people in this room for different topics. This has all come to us through an organization called GeoBrowser, who's a software company that just saw the need to get knowledge out there. They're currently on a worldwide effort to try and reinvent themselves, and they're doing an incredible job. But there's going to be some slight changes to the organization structure. And I want to introduce you to Michelle. So Michelle and I are kind of addressing some upcoming changes, and we wanted to make sure that we include you guys in the conversation itself. So Michelle, maybe you could help us, because this is not just about legal services. This is about how do we help a city figure out what's broken and how can we work as a community to fix things. So how does that play into this?
Yeah. So, well, I'm Michelle Littlefield, and I've been supporting GEO and the We Heart SF community since, I first started attending in September, and then I was slowly brought on to help support this community, and then also a lot of the data work that has been happening just around all of the service questions that are coming up around the critical services that San Francisco and you all provide. So we're at a pivotal point right now where, as Paul mentioned, with the great support of GEO and the House of Web3 creating this community, we've had some amazing speakers and leaders come. And I think we're at an inflection point right now. And so we've been having a lot of internal discussions around how do we take We Heart SF to the next level, moving and expanding beyond speaker series to speaker series plus, and actually building solutions together, inviting the wider community, the tech community, on really thinking through how do we move from problem solution and then actual prototyping of solutions. And I know a lot of you have been anticipating, what is going to come next with GEO. So One of the things that we're going to be doing is, so GEO will continue to provide the space and sponsor this every month. We are going to be thinking through internally how we can invite sponsorship and partnership with many organizations to continue this momentum that we've built with this community. And so we will be making some announcements very soon about what those big next steps are as we talk through and pitch to some potential sponsors to continue these talks. But we just wanted to let you all know where we're at, that this is actually a really amazing opportunity to transition into building now, co-designing and actually building the solutions. So one of the ideas that we've been talking about has been how do we leverage the community that we've built and really, leverage the talents, the various talents from leadership to nonprofit expertise to technology. How do we bring those talents together to really think through building out a set of solutions, both technology-wise, people-wise, to really solve some of these greatest pain points. And the things that we've heard, some of the things that we've heard around the greatest pain points are, how do we get more funding in a more efficient way? How do we refer people to organizations that have the capacity to provide the assistance? How do we know that we're targeting the right people and the right neighborhoods to offer the support services that are needed? And then how do we dig deeper and really kind of understand the deeper pain points and service challenges that nonprofits are experiencing? So we're going to dig deeper into those as we go along. And so expect some emails and communications from us. But yeah, we just wanted to let you know that these are the next steps that we're kind of thinking through right now.
Yep. And we've had some amazing innovative efforts. Eric done some incredible work around workforce development. We think we can kind of leverage those types of solutions and really kind of bring people together and solve problems in very specific ways. So we're super excited about what this might look like. We're going to continue the once a month, first Wednesday of the month. Hoping you can join us again and be part of that whole effort. We have more details to share afterwards. We're going to be working on some other projects on the site as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but thank you guys for coming down here, for being part of the We Heart SF community. And we're looking forward to having you be involved in our next reinvention of We Heart SF.
That's right. Thanks, everyone.